So yes, absolutely. Air density is going to be the great factor determining how much that bullet is going to drop down range, assuming that you're using the same bullet, velocity, and all other things being equal, and just kind of ignoring wind for this situation. Air density is going to be the main factor in how much that can change. And it will change, I think, more than a lot of people realize when you're shooting in different environments. Now, because air density is a little bit hard to measure, what ends up happening is if you've ever used any ballistic calculator that has manual inputs, it's going to ask you for a few things. It's going to ask you for probably your elevation, and from there it's going to pull from a chart and get your air pressure at your elevation. It's going to ask you for your temperature and your humidity. So from those three things, it's actually going to go and calculate what your air density is, and that's the reason for inputting those variables and why your calculator needs those. All right, so to get an idea of how much things change, let's take a look at my 6 Creedmoor at different elevations or different air densities. So we're going to keep the temperature and the pressure the same, only going to vary the elevation to change our air density. So at 500 yards, let's just look at an elevation of 1,500 feet above sea level. That gives me a drop of 45.5 inches. So now let's move up to kind of where I normally shoot, where I live, is about 5,200, 5,300 feet above sea level. You see the drop is going to be 43.5 inches. So only a 2-inch difference between those two elevations. So not drastically different, a half MOA maybe. If I go up to 10,000 feet where I hunt occasionally, that drops down to 41.6 inches of drop. So almost 4 inches less than at 1,500 feet. So now that's still within 1 MOA, so really it's not a drastic difference at 500 yards between all those different elevations. So I could probably shoot at 500 yards and be fairly confident knowing that it might drop just a hair less at 10,000 feet than it would at like 1,500 feet above sea level. But it's not going to be drastically different. But let's move to 1,000 yards now and see what that actually moves to. So now at 1,000 yards with the 10,000 feet above sea level, I have 244 inches of drop. So now let's move back to 5,300 feet. I get 267 inches of drop. So that is about 23 inches different. So about 2 MOA. So that's definitely enough to get me off target at that distance. So now let's move back down to 1,500 feet above sea level. My drop now is 292.7 inches. So from 10,000 feet, that is almost 50 inches. And from my 5,300 feet elevation here, that is a difference of nearly 30 inches. So at 1,000 yards, you can see that it will definitely be enough to put you off target at that distance, at those different elevations. So at 500 yards, it was fairly consistent, but at 1,000 yards, it is definitely drastically different. And again, that is all things being equal except our elevation, which is going to affect our air density. So yes, air density is playing a huge part in how much that bullet is going to drop at distance, and it's also why you really do need to take into account what your elevation, what your temperature, and what your humidity are, so that you can enter those into your calculator so you can get a reasonable output if you're shooting in different environments and different situations.